City of Santa Barbara Ordinance Committee meeting for December 10th, 2024. Ms. Crescente, if you would call the roll.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Chair Jordan.
And here.
Thank you.
And do we have any public comment for items that are not on today's agenda?
Chair Jordan, we do not.
Okay, and then if you would read us out our item on the agenda today, please.
Subject, introduction of ordinance for water metering requirements for affordable housing adapted reuse projects and other Title 14 revisions.
Thank you. Welcome to the water team. Carry away.
Thank you, Chair Jordan and committee members. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply and Services Manager for the Water Resources Division. And today I have with me Ms. Dana Hoffenberg, who's going to provide her presentation. But ahead of that, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for what we're trying to do here today. This is actually a very niche or specialized change that we're making to our water metering requirements. It exists in this space of our water metering requirements, and specifically requiring having individual meters for our accounts, is really important for our water efficiency goals. But we also want to be supportive of affordability initiatives across the city. And these changes really do kind of address a very specific type of project that we think will enhance the city's opportunity for affordability. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage that we're playing within the tension of those two things, and staff feels very confident recommending these changes moving forward.
Good morning, Chair Jordan and Council Members Sneddon and Gutierrez. My name is Dana Hoffenberg. I'm the Acting Water Service Superintendent for the Water Resources Division. And as Ms. Corey mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you today about a proposed ordinance that looks at our water metering requirements for adaptive reuse affordable housing projects. So just a quick outline of what we'll be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the purpose of the proposed ordinance as it relates to affordable housing adaptive reuse projects. There are also some miscellaneous updates within that same chapter, just some word cleanup and word choice that we'll be discussing as well. We'll go over our discussion at Water Commission, and then we'll talk about next steps, recommendations, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So looking at the proposed purpose of the ordinance, overall, this is just meant to provide additional flexibility in water metering policies for affordable housing adaptive reuse projects. So again, this is specifically talking to projects that are both affordable housing and adaptive reuse. So they must meet both qualifications. So it is a pretty niche type of project that we're talking about today, which is, again, one of the reasons why staff is comfortable being a lot more flexible in our water metering regulations in this context. And then some additional purpose of the ordinance is just to clean up and clarify existing language within that same chapter. While we're already making updates to that chapter, we just wanted to clarify a few language and policies. So let's talk more about affordable housing adaptive reuse projects. First, just some terminology. For the purposes of this presentation, when I say affordable housing, I'm speaking specifically about development in which 100% of the units are affordable to very low and low income families. So again, 100% of the units have to be affordable to low and very low incomes. And the property or the project must be developed under a covenant. So the covenant will be recorded against the title of the property. So it's essentially an agreement that runs along with the development. The covenant would require that all residential units be rented to very low and low income households. The covenants typically last several decades. We've, generally speaking, see them between 50 and 99 years, so they are long-term covenants. The covenant also does specify that these flexible metering regulations require the property to be low income, affordable to low incomes. So in the event in the future, if the development is no longer a affordable housing development, these water metering flexibility regulations will revert back. So they would be required to put in whatever is the current water metering regulation at the time that the development no longer was affordable. And when I talk about adaptive reuse, I mean the retrofitting and repurposing of an existing non-residential building to residential dwelling units. So this means, for example, take an existing hotel and converting that existing building that is a hotel to apartment units. So it's taking existing building and, in a way, recycling it to a new use. It's not new construction. Some additional background on our water metering regulations. The city does have quite a long-standing requirement to install dedicated individual water meters for new dwelling units. The state also requires that the city or water providers do this. However, the state carves out some exceptions for affordable housing. So affordable housing developments do not have to have dedicated water meters for each individual dwelling unit. But the city does have our longstanding individual metering requirement to promote our water efficiency goals and customer communications. So let's go over the proposed changes. The proposed changes would waive our requirement to have individual water meters for individual dwelling units when the project is both affordable housing and adaptive reuse. So in practice, what does that look like? For example, let's say that there is a hotel that is planned to be converted from the hotel to affordable rental units. That hotel is, of course, already served by a city water meter. What we would be allowing them to do is, as they're recycling that building from a commercial building to rental housing for low-income folks, they would be able just to use that existing water service that's already there. This would, if we didn't have this regulation in place, they would be required to be putting in separate water meters. What that could look like is having to open up walls, redo their plumbing, cut out pipes, insert water meters. They would also have to likely change the configuration of their hot water heating. Often hotels, commercial uses will just have one hot water heater for the whole building. So if they were required to have individual water meters, they may have to instead install dedicated water heaters for each dwelling unit. Or instead install 2 water meters for each dwelling unit, one hot and cold. So this just allows them to do the project a lot more quickly and affordably, and allows them to really execute what's meant to be kind of a low-hanging fruit kind of project, where the project is meant to be done, quickly and affordably. All of our other water metering and efficiency requirements will remain in place. So, for example, our water efficient landscape ordinance, our requirement for commercial and residential to be metered separately, all these things would still remain in place. So what are the impacts that we expect from this ordinance? Again, it's just meant to increase flexibility and decrease costs for these very niche, low-hanging fruit affordable housing projects, because again, it is projects that are both affordable housing and adaptive reuse. We do anticipate a fairly minimal number of applicable projects, so staff does not anticipate any sweeping negative changes to our water efficiency goals as a result of this. It's going to have a pretty limited impact. And as I mentioned earlier, our separate metering requirement is quite important to the city and our water resources division when it comes to customer communication and reaching our efficiency goals. But staff is comfortable making these projects be more flexible in the case of these projects because it is a very niche, high value kind of project. So let's go over some of the additional changes we're going to be proposing under the same chapter within the Municipal Code. These are not related to affordable housing. These are not related to adaptive reuse. These are just some extra cleanup activities that we're doing. So one of the changes will be allowing private submetering for affordable housing projects that are new construction. So again, these would not be the adaptive reuse projects. So again, it just creates some additional level of flexibility for these projects. We do allow private submetering for more standard private developments in certain circumstances, so it is an existing practice. So this is just extending that existing practice to affordable housing projects just to increase their flexibility of options when they're developing. Another change we are making is to our language for accessory dwelling unit metering regulations. There's no material change to the actual policy when it comes to water metering for ADUs. It's just updating the language and the definitions to be more in line with current state language. The state, as you probably are aware, comes out with a lot of regulations pretty frequently about ADUs. So this is just updating our Title 14 to be up to date with how the state defines ADUs. And some simple word choice revisions to make more clear existing policies. So we did bring this item to Water Commission last month on November 21st. There was some pretty robust discussion. As I mentioned, our water meter requirements are very important to the Water Resources Division for meeting our efficiency goals and our customer communications. So there was some hesitancy among Water Commission to be more lax on our water metering requirements. However, this is a very niche project type that we are proposing this for. Again, only adaptive reuse affordable housing projects. So ultimately, because we don't see any negative impacts to our overall efficiency goals by allowing this flexibility for these special projects, Water Commission did vote in favor of staff's recommendation with 1 abstention. So going over next steps, we went to Water Commission in November. We are here today at Ordinance Committee. If Ordinance Committee so chooses to pass this forward, then it will be introduced to City Council on the 14th. And if Council adopts that, it will be brought to Council for adoption on the 28th. And if Council adopts the ordinance at that time, it would go into effect at the end of February. So our recommendation is that the Ordinance Committee recommends City Council adopt an ordinance amending Santa Barbara Municipal Code Chapter 1408. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff? No? I'm the only one? So just because I don't know, help me on how you think the dynamic works on somebody who would take advantage of the low-income part and just 1 meter for all the units. How does a landlord collect for the water expense? Is that part of the rent, or can they carve out, can they get their water bill and carve out to the number of units, a separate amount for each unit, separate from the rent? How would that work out in the real world?
Yeah, so I mean, it would be up to the owner or the landlord, whoever is operating the property. They could just not send individual bills it could just be incorporated as part of the rent, just like how, most of our housing stock in the city predate when we had separate metering ordinances. So most apartment complexes just already have 1 water meter. And so the cost for utilities are already included in rent.
Okay.
There are other ways the landlord could choose to bill their tenants for water usage or utilities just based on proportionality rules. There are state laws governing that of what's acceptable. So the state already has a lot of framework of what is acceptable versus what is not. It could be, based on bedrooms, something like that. Because these are landlords that they have to rent these to very low and low income folks, and they already have a covenant with the city. A lot of people living in this housing are low income folks. Whatever is the landlord may have subsidies from the state, I'm not sure, so they may not be billing the tenants for utility usage anyway.
Okay. Just curious, so this is kind of a carrot, but then if you have a water abuser among one of your tenants where it's on a 1 water meter, how a landlord in today's world of rent caps or that's just building into the rent, how if they took advantage of the carrot to do it that way, and then they're faced with like an out of control water user that's just killing the water rates, but what do they do then? Is that just a consequence we don't know that will happen so far?
Yeah, Chair Jordan. So, as the Water Resources Division, because a lot of our housing stock is already built this way, we do have experience helping landlords the best we can. As you know, we do have our AMI system that we've installed, so all landlords and all account holders have access to hourly water usage information now. So that does help with communication and alerts to property owners. Earlier on, they can get an alert if there's high water usage just after 24 hours instead of them waiting a whole month to then receive a super high bill. Mm-hmm. So this allows earlier intervention. Well, they'll get notified earlier, and then we can help them work through when the usage is happening. But yeah, that is a downside to not having individual water meters that the developers will have to take into consideration when they're developing. They could, if they wanted to, still install dedicated meters for each
Right.
unit. That's up to them.
If they were worried.
If they wanted to, yes, and we'd be happy to help them go through that
I'd just be
process.
making up numbers, but I just remember it was like 3 years of water increases, like at 25% or something a year, which is probably not quite correct, but there were significant 3-year water increases coming. And so somebody's got to just figure out how to balance that out in the field then, what's the consequences if I let everybody do it at once? what's the benefit to me if I upfront the expense to go separate them now, right?
Correct, yeah. So they can always upfront install private submeters, even that's a cheaper option. And then they could manage those private submeters themselves and send bills to tenants themselves if they wanted to do that. And there are companies up and down the state that help developers do that as well.
And my only other question has to do with ADUs. Is there no potential traction really seen out there for chasing carrots like this with people who are building ADUs and would be interested in making those a low or very low income covenanted ADU? Is this not seen as much of a traction builder to be one of a set of menu options to offer them to build their ADU and offer it to a low income tenant?
Chair Jordan, we'd have to talk with planning staff a little bit more to see if there's interest in that. ADUs, this does apply to adaptive reuse projects, so this would only be for ADUs where they're using like existing space.
Well, you have
or an
some
existing building.
constraints on ADUs on the last page that if I'm building a new, however you want to qualify a new house. I see a lot of projects on the Mesa that are knocking down a house, building a new house, and building an ADU at the same time. And I'm not too all certain they're not just kind of weaseling around the design guidelines for more house, right? I mean, I see that too, where not a family member doesn't move in, or they just don't use the extra space, calling it an ADU. But I'm just wondering, we've heard talk about how do we get more ADUs to be not necessarily market rate? And would this in the future be one of the carrots you can offer? You'd have to walk across the hall and talk to the community development people, but I just kind of get the sense that discussion is still out there and wants to come on we don't just make them true market rate, that we start to offer some benefits if you want to put a low-income tenant in there. And I guess, so we would just maybe, if that happened, we would come back and just revise this again, right?
Yeah, Chair Jordan, yeah, of course. We work closely with planning a lot, especially as it relates to ADUs, and especially also as it relates to this new adaptive reuse initiative that's going on. So we are always happy to work with planning as they come forward with more carrots that they put forward for low income or affordable housing ADUs. We'd be always happy to talk with them about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. That's all the questions I have. Is there any public comment for this item, Ms. Crescente?
Yes, we have one public speaker, Clarissa Montenegro.
Hi.
Hi. Good afternoon, Chair Jordan and committee members. My name is Clarissa Montenegro, and I'm with the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara. Mr. Frederick sends his regrets he could not be here in person to share his appreciation and support. I am here to share the Housing Authority's support and thank the committee and city staff on the introduction of the ordinance for water metering requirements for affordable housing adaptive reuse projects. As you know, there are many challenges to the creation and preservation of affordable housing. As a result, it has become a necessity to continuously seek new paths to provide affordable housing in our community. The most recent path we find ourselves venturing into is adaptive reuse. New paths often come with their own challenges, and we are fortunate that the city recognizes the need to also adapt to the changing landscape of creating affordable housing. As we and other affordable housing providers venture into adaptive reuse, we hope we can continue to count on your support. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chair Jordan, no further speakers.
All right, Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Jordan, and thank you for presentation. And this was heard at the Water Commission, and as described, there was robust discussion, and I think mainly about whether this would be impacting water efficiency or water use, and you've addressed that. And just to highlight from the council perspective, I think we've been sort of championing adaptive reuse options and how to streamline that, no pun intended here, and also for 100% affordable low income and very low income, and this achieves both of those, so it's very forward thinking to bring this forward, and it's been one of those sticking points in trying to address this adaptive reuse, and we have some other sticking points still to address, but this really helps both of those goals along, and I think it's creative solutions, it's proactive solutions, and I'm also appreciating the updated language with the ADUs and pointing out that it's in line with the state regulations and that people have choices whether to take this route or not take this route. I just really wanted to voice appreciation for the positive letters of support when these things come forward. So Housing Authority, but also League of Women Voters. It's so helpful to get a letter that's completely positive, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for that. And I think I just wholeheartedly support these changes, and I'm really thankful that they've come forward.
Just echo all you heard there too. You continue to hear that, particularly the difference between lower income housing and market rate housing. One of the challenges is us. Getting out of the way either in time or money, and this addresses part of that. I hope at some point we get to a point where we say it's not just adaptive reuse, but it's any lower income project too, that that's kind of our way to kind of solve that time and money challenge that we present to any project like that, and keep moving in that direction. Without any further discussion, I'd look for a motion. Go ahead.
I'd move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Crisante.
Moved by Councilmember Sneddon, seconded by Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez to forward staff recommendation for introduction to City Council. We'll take a vote. You know what, 1 second. Hold on. Got to take attendance first. And go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously.
Okay, so that's a unanimous recommendation forward to council. Thanks very much to staff, and we will be adjourned.